Beneath the layer of grey concrete, the sound of metal dragging echoed, mixing with the steady drip of water. On the surface, it was only a silent living room, the carpet covering the joint between wall and floor. A steel door the same color as the wall, with no handle, its key held by only one person. Below, no windows, a weak yellow light. The smell of damp mixed with something hard to name. No one knew the room existed. No one had ever stepped down. What was there? Still waited, behind the silence. In every case, there is always an absolutely private space. A basement, a locked room, a restricted area where only one person may enter. Others do not ask. No one wants to know what is inside. Only when the door is forced open do the cold walls tell the story they have kept silent for years. If the stories hidden beneath this silence make you want to know more, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. Perhaps the detail you notice is the one others have overlooked. Robert William Pickton lived alone on a pig farm on the outskirts of Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. The road leading in was a narrow strip of land, flanked by tall grass and leaning wooden fences. The smell of livestock feed hung heavy in the air, masking all other odors. Pickton wore overalls, often drove a small truck, and rarely spoke with anyone for long. People knew he raised pigs, sold meat at agricultural fairs. No one asked further. Behind the pig pens was an old barn, its door always locked. Inside, a staircase led down to a concrete floor. No one but Pickton had ever stepped down. From the early 1980s, many women from Vancouver's east side began to disappear. Most lived on the margins of society, addicted, homeless. Police recorded the reports, but did not connect them into a pattern. The disappearances remained in thin files, with no witnesses, no clear crime scenes. Pickton often drove into the city center at night, picked someone up, and left. No one saw them return. During those years, no one paid attention to the pig farm on the outskirts. In 1997, a woman ran from the farm, injured, calling for help. She told police Pickton had tried to kill her. Police found the weapon, but the case was dismissed because the witness was considered unreliable. Pickton returned to the farm. From then, the number of disappearances increased rapidly. In the community, there were rumors of a place on the edge of town, but no one dared to name it. In 2002, police obtained a warrant to search the property on suspicion that Pickton possessed illegal weapons. Inside the farm, they found documents and personal belongings of missing women. The search widened. The ground around the pig pens was dug up. In the soil mixed with leftover feed, they found hundreds of human bone fragments, some no larger than a coin. Several were discovered inside a meat grinder. The investigation lasted for months. Forensic teams collected thousands of samples, conducting DNA analysis. The results matched more than 24 missing women. In his statement, Pickton said only, "I was going to make it an even 50. No expression, no explanation. The trial began in 2006. Prosecutors presented physical evidence from the scene, testimony from a surviving witness, and forensic results. The jury found Pickton guilty of multiple serious charges. He was sentenced to life in prison, with no parole eligibility for 25 years. The farm was demolished. The land was treated repeatedly to eliminate any risk of biohazard contamination. But local residents said that passing by, they could still catch an odd smell in the wind. Today, Pickton remains incarcerated. He rarely speaks to anyone, does not admit guilt, and shows no sign of remorse. A police file note reads, "No longer dangerous outside. The danger remains in his head." The victims' families did not receive complete remains to bury. Some were given only a small plastic bag containing a bone fragment less than an inch long. The gaps in the cemetery were like the gaps in the answers. And the question remains, over 2 decades, how many people passed by the farm? How many times did they hear the sound of metal beneath the ground, but chose silence? The farm in Port Coquitlam was torn down. The empty lot left a scar on the map, but other basements still exist beneath someone's home. As in Philadelphia, a 2-story house with a green lawn and white fence raised no suspicion. But below, between concrete walls, another family was built, in a way no one wanted to imagine. The house at 3520 North Marshall Street, Philadelphia, drew no attention. A red brick front, green-painted wooden door, worn concrete steps. Gary Heidnik lived alone, kept to himself. Neighbors saw him come and go in an old Cadillac, or walking with a bag whose contents no one knew. Heidnik had served in the military, discharged early due to mental health issues. Afterward, he founded the Church of the Ministry of God, a self-styled religious organization whose bank account grew quickly through donations and stock investments. No one knew exactly what he preached. The basement under the house was low, with a damp concrete floor. In a far corner was a deep pit with a wide opening, covered by a thick wooden board. No windows, dim yellow light from a single bulb. The smell of dampness mixed with something else. In November 1986, Heidnik began bringing women to his home. They were homeless, addicted, vulnerable. He promised them shelter and money. But once inside, the door locked, and the basement became the only place they saw. Sounds from beneath the floor. The clink of chains, muffled crying. Sometimes reached outside. Neighbors thought it was the radio. No one called the police. In the basement, victims were chained to the wall or confined inside the pit, its opening covered and weighted down. He imposed rules: eating, sleeping, daily routines on schedule. When he wanted to mask sounds, he turned the music up loud. Some victims disappeared, leaving unexplained absences. In January 1987, the family of one missing woman, Josefina Rivera, reported her disappearance to police. The file noted it as possible voluntary absence due to the victim's circumstances. No search warrant was issued. During that time, Heidnik continued abducting more women. The number of victims in the basement grew. Living conditions deteriorated. Some were injured without treatment. Their morale broke down, but all pleas for help were blocked by the steel door. On March 23, 1987, Rivera, the longest held captive, persuaded Heidnik to let her go out with him to run errands. She escaped and notified police. This time, the information was acted upon immediately. Police arrived at the North Marshall Street house in the afternoon. Heidnik opened the door, appearing calm. When asked, he said, "There's no one here." A search warrant was executed. Descending into the basement, flashlight beams caught hollow faces, chained to the walls. Beneath the wooden cover was a deep pit, showing signs that multiple people had been kept there. The scene was sealed. The special investigation team documented numerous items: handcuffs, chains, women's clothing, identification cards, and personal effects with no clear owner. Forensic analysis identified biological traces from at least 6 women, 2 of whom were never found. Heidnik was arrested at the house. In questioning, he said he was merely building a big family and that what happened was a way of raising. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing. The surviving victims were taken to hospital. All were malnourished, bearing old and new injuries, some with severe infections. They spent months in physical and psychological recovery. In their statements, they described being starved, kept for days at a time in the pit, hearing only footsteps and the sound of metal locks. The trial began in late 1988. The prosecution relied on the detailed testimony of survivors, physical evidence, and forensic findings. The jury took less than a day to return a death sentence. On July 6, 1999, the sentence was carried out. Heidnik gave no final words. The house was then sealed. The basement filled in. But for those who had lived nearby, the memory of nighttime sounds from beneath the concrete floor remained. Like an echo, they could not erase. The house on North Marshall Street was sealed, its basement filled, but concrete does not always seal away silence. In another city, halfway around the world, an old apartment block still cast a yellow light into a damp hallway. At the end of the hallway, a metal door with no sign, always locked. The key was held by a quiet maintenance worker, a man the neighbors thought only repaired wiring, but who kept for himself a restricted zone where no one else entered. The apartment block on the outskirts of Moscow had been built in the 1970s. Stained gray concrete walls, barred windows, narrow corridors with flickering ceiling lights. On the ground floor, at the hidden corner leading down to the service basement, was the apartment of Ivan Utkin. Utkin, 40 years old, worked as the building's maintenance technician. He carried a large ring of keys, able to open almost any door. Residents were used to seeing him fixing pipes, replacing light bulbs, or pushing a cart of tools down the corridor. No one asked questions. The basement of the building was a narrow maze. Damp concrete walls, pipes running along the ceiling, the heat from the central system making the air dense. At the end of a dark corridor was a metal door with no sign, its lock newer and sturdier than the others. Only Utkin had its key. In 1997, several residents disappeared. They were young men living alone or people who kept to themselves. Police recorded the missing persons reports but found no leads. The building had no cameras, and neighbors recalled few details. Utkin was often seen at night, carrying a cloth bag or cardboard box into the basement. When asked, he said they contained repair supplies or discarded materials. In the autumn of 1998, a new tenant on the third floor heard the sound of metal striking and a door opening from the far end of the basement corridor close to midnight. When he told the security guard, he was advised, "Don't pay attention. That's the maintenance storeroom." In February 1999, police received a report from a family. Their son, a resident of the building, had lost contact. The last time he was seen, he had said he was going to meet Utkin to have a lock repaired. He never returned. An investigation team was formed, interviewing each resident. Several recalled seeing Utkin with some of the missing residents heading toward the basement. No one saw them come back up. Police decided to search the basement. When the metal door at the end of the corridor was opened, a smell of dampness mixed with something unidentifiable poured out. Inside was a small, bare-walled room with no windows. Along one wall was a wooden shelf holding dozens of cardboard boxes. Inside each box were clothes, papers, watches, and other personal items belonging to the missing. In the corner stood a wooden table with a desk lamp. Seated at the table when they entered, Utkin was polishing a wristwatch until it gleamed. He did not appear surprised, only asked, "What is this about?" A search of the room uncovered biological traces matching at least 3 missing persons. Other evidence suggested there were additional unidentified victims. Utkin was arrested on the spot. During questioning, he remained mostly silent, answering only briefly. When asked about the number of belongings in the room, he said, "People forgot them. I kept them." He offered no further explanation. The 2000 trial was brief. The prosecution relied on physical evidence and witness testimony, charging Utkin with multiple serious offenses. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. The room at the end of the corridor was sealed with welded metal. But residents of the building said that whenever they passed by, they still felt as if someone was standing on the other side of the steel, listening to each step. The metal door at the end of the corridor was welded shut. But in another suburb, there was no need for steel to mark a boundary. Only an old wooden house, set back from the main road, and a staircase leading down to a cold earthen floor. There, the damp smell of concrete was replaced by the scent of straw and horse sweat. The man who tended the horses, Sergey Golovkin, also had a basement no one knew about. Sergey Golovkin was born in 1959 and grew up in the suburbs of Moscow. His father was an engineer, his mother a teacher. A quiet boy, he preferred to be alone, spending much of his time in the nearby stables. After graduation, Golovkin took a position at a state-owned horse farm. The work gave him access to remote areas rarely visited by others. The wooden house where he lived was not far from the farm. At the back, a wooden door led down to a small cellar no one in the village had ever entered. Inside, the walls were damp, the ceiling low. A single bulb hung from twisted electrical cord, its yellow light failing to reach the corners. A few tools hung on the wall, alongside several tightly knotted plastic bags. In 1986, disappearances began. The victims were teenage boys from the area or visitors to the stables. Police records initially listed them as runaways or accidents with no clear crime scene. Golovkin often approached boys who were alone, inviting them to see the horses or help with small tasks. Afterward, they vanished. He would leave the farm early the next morning, carrying a small plastic bag. By 1991, police had noticed a pattern. Most victims had disappeared near where Golovkin worked. But with no direct evidence, he remained free. In the autumn of 1992, a 14-year-old boy went missing on his way home. The last witness saw him walking with Golovkin toward the stables. A search warrant was issued. Police arrived at the wooden house. Golovkin opened the door, calmly inviting them in. The ground floor was tidy, nothing unusual. But descending into the cellar, the air changed. The smell of damp mixed with something heavier, stifling. In the corner was a wooden chair with scratches. Next to rope, a carving knife, and tightly knotted plastic bags. Forensic analysis found biological traces in the cellar matching multiple missing victims. Personal items, shirts, plastic watches, shoelaces were discovered in a wooden box. Golovkin was arrested immediately. In interrogation, he recounted his actions in detail, his voice flat, without expression. He said he had hunted a total of 11 people. He gave no reason, only repeating the steps as if they were routine. The 1993 trial drew the attention of the Russian press. The prosecution presented the confession, physical evidence, and forensic results. Golovkin offered no objection, no plea for leniency. The death sentence was handed down. In August 1996, it was carried out. The wooden house's cellar was demolished, but the ground where it stood was left unused. Local residents avoided passing by at night, saying the damp smell still rose when it rained, as if the cellar had never disappeared. The basement beneath the wooden house was gone, the earth above left bare. But such empty spaces were not limited to Russia. Across the Pacific, deep in the California woods, there was a wooden cabin hidden behind thick pine trees. The front door was always locked, the windows covered with heavy curtains. But the most dangerous door lay beneath the kitchen floor, one that no one but its owner had ever opened. There, Leonard Lake kept things no one should ever see. Leonard Lake was born in 1945, raised in San Francisco. From an early age, he was preoccupied with survivalist and war stories. As an adult, he served in the U.S. Marine Corps, fought in Vietnam, then was discharged for mental health reasons. Afterward, he lived in seclusion, associating with others who shared his interest in weapons and self-reliance survival. In the early 1980s, Lake purchased a wooden cabin deep in the forest at Wilseyville, California. From the outside, it looked like a summer retreat. Sloped wooden roof, small front porch, trees all around. But beneath the kitchen floor, a hinged wooden panel concealed the entrance to a cellar. No one but Lake and his associate, Charles Ng, had ever gone down there. The cellar was divided into small compartments with rough concrete walls, a metal-doored holding room, a narrow steel bed, and a single dim ceiling bulb. Some corners had cameras wired to the living room above. On a wooden shelf, Lake kept a video camera and dozens of tapes. From 1983, disappearances began occurring in the area. Victims included entire families or couples. Their vehicles were abandoned in public places, with no clear signs of struggle. Police files did not yet connect the cases. Lake and Ung approached victims in various ways, posing as buyers or sellers, placing advertisements, or making contact in parking lots. Once taken to the cabin, the cellar door locked and no one came out. Some victims were kept in the holding room, filmed on camera. The tapes showed them before they vanished, with no accompanying explanation. In the woods near the cabin, police later found freshly dug pits, quickly filled, containing ash and human bone fragments mixed with melted metal from jewelry. The case began to unravel in June 1985, when Ung was caught shoplifting. Lake was with him, but fled. Police traced the vehicle's license plate to the Wilseyville cabin. When stopped, Lake was carrying a handgun and was taken to the station for questioning. In the holding cell, he swallowed a hidden cyanide capsule and died a few days later. A search of the cabin uncovered the hidden cellar. Inside, along with the holding room and recording equipment, they found more than 40 kilograms of ash and bone fragments, later identified as belonging to at least 11 different victims. Also in the house was Lake's journal, detailing plans for abduction, selection, and disposal of victims, along with a list of personal effects. Charles Ung fled to Canada, where he was later arrested and extradited to the United States in 1991. The trial lasted for years, with evidence including videotapes, the journal, and witness testimony. In 1999, Eng was sentenced to death. The cabin was demolished, the cellar filled in, but the land was left unused. Local residents avoided the area at night, saying that when standing among the trees, they felt watched from somewhere below ground level. 5 doors, 5 dark spaces underground, from the pig farm in Canada, the pit in Philadelphia, the locked room at the end of a Moscow corridor, the cellar beneath a horse stable, to the hidden bunker in the California woods. Each was secured by a single key. These spaces were built to be completely separate from the world above. And only when the door opened did the years of silence break with the truth. But how many such basements still exist right now beneath our feet? And how many times have we